for coming to this session. This is my first time ever presenting today. So thank you so much. My name is Jessie Ransom, and I'm a solutions architect with Ex Libris. Some of you may be familiar with the term solutions architect, and some of you may not. But essentially what I do is work with libraries to show them how the Ex Libris products work, and some other things as well, but that's my job in a nutshell. For those of you who only saw the description of this session from ALA, you will be excited to see that we have a surprise guest here. Dennis was a late addition to the agenda, so we were able to update some of the material about this session, and some of it was not updated. So I'm very, very, very excited to introduce Dennis Smith, who's the head of Access Services at the University of Miami. Area of relationships with faculty and instructors on campus. And then at the end, I will show you a quick demo of what the product looks like, because sometimes I think it's hard to kind of wrap your head around what we're talking about here until you've actually seen it in action. So that is the plan for the session today. And with that, I will pass it over to you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome. As I said, my name is Dennis from the University of Miami. I have some friends from Grand Ocean University I used to be at. I just mentioned that because but I wanted to talk a little bit of background about the University of Miami. It is a private institution, started in 1925. Has about 17,000 students, to give you an idea of how big it is. We have about 3.7 million volumes, about which about 2.5 are print. Just to give you a background on the university, it is in beautiful Coral Gables, Florida, which is right there in the middle of Miami. I also always like to give a little credit to the people who actually made what I'm going to talk about happen. Richard Morales is my lead on reserves. He is the one who implemented most of what I'm going to talk about today. We work very closely together, and John Sandoval is my manager over ILL and reserves. So he's done a lot with this. So in addition to myself, if you have questions, you're always welcome to contact any of us, and we can help you get some more information about it. So in the beginning, as I said, the University of Miami selected Alma as its solution. I joined them in 2015, so we got prepared. We went live in May 2016. At the same time, they began talking to us about Leganto. Leganto was just launching, actually right after our implementation. We were a little bit reluctant, so we waited until December to get started with them. And then we did a soft launch all the way through April 2017. And then in May 2017, we went live. The one thing I want to share with you about our implementation of Selective Leganto was Leganto has an awesome amount of interface with faculty, but that's not why I wanted to go to Leganto. Our service model pretty much with reserves is about wait till they come to you. The faculty comes to us, they drop off reserves, they contact us about electronic reserves. So with that service model, actually offering them a system that really helps them engage directly, I was kind of worried about it. So I didn't think that was going to be as effective. And the pilot kind of bore out that truth. So we contacted, during our pilot, over 30 of our top users in reserves, both electronic and physical. And we had about 10 of them, and we had about 10 retiring, which I thought was a little scary, but we had about 10 of them really say, oh, we were interested. So we sent out information, we gave them videos, we contacted them directly, we offered one-on-one service. Ultimately, only 2 of them really engaged with the contact. So that kind of told me that going at it from the front door was not going to be as effective for our people. But what I do want to say is what I did at this point, I knew this, but the reason I really thought Leganto was a powerful tool for us is because of the simplified workflow between reserves and the ILS and the Primo discovery system. So for me, that was my selling point. I said, give me Leganto just for that. I can simplify my workflow, I can improve discovery. So the pilot wasn't a disappointment for me, but we learned a lot just about talking to him. As you see, one of the people who did adopt it was the chair of the Department of Musicology. And he really liked the system. You know, as a head of the department, he doesn't have time, but he actually said once he got the hang of it, he thought it was great. So the program I'm going to talk about came from 2 points. It came from the Leganto and the Alma interface, thinking about, okay, how do we improve reserves now that we have it? But the other thing that was very interesting is that a student approached us about this same time and wanted, he asked to meet with the dean invited me to the meeting, and he wanted to talk about textbook affordability, that magic word, which means that students want us to buy every textbook and have multiple copies on reserves for them. And he talked about this wonderful program that he had experienced at his undergraduate, University of South Florida, and how the not going to be is about just making the textbook accessible to those who can't get textbooks, not to make them for people who just don't want to buy. And there's a lot of different parts of this program. I'm going to just explore one of them today to give you just a little background on what we did and talk about it. So I call this the bookstore initiative. I had done something sort of similar before, but basically I approached the bookstore and I said, look, you've got this powerful list of all the courses, all the required textbooks, could you share it? At that time, they were very amenable and gave me a copy of the list. And what I think is so powerful about the Leganto Alma set is that I was able to take that list along with the ISBNs that they provided and run it off of a set in Alma to find out what we actually had in our repository. So I got a sort of complete list of what I think was being sold for that course that semester, what we already owned. You know, a lot of it was already on reserve, so there was no surprise there, but we found textbooks, but also them on physical reserves, but that's not going to expand the Leganto and really reach out to faculty. So what I came up with was a program in which we took every single book we could find that matched. We created a Leganto reading list, we interfaced it with our Blackboard system, and then here's the key. We reached out to the faculty that we created that course list for and told them that we did this. We said, look, this is your required reading. We have put it on physical reserves. If it was an ebook, we put it on electronic reserves. We've created this list, which is available to you and your students through Blackboard. Please let us know if you have additional readings. And by the way, we're using a new system. I call it U-Reserves because our Primo system is called U-Search. So, but I introduced them to Leganto, so if you need more resources. So it was kind of reaching out on a first-time basis to say, here's this new system. We went ahead and did this for you. So when I did this, we did actually 2 semesters of it. One was a practice run where we did most of what we learned, what we could. The second one, we tried to go full-fledged, and this was around the same time of the implementation. So it was the spring, summer of 2017. The key here was to create relationships, but there was a few challenges. So the first challenge that I think everyone experiences is the bookstore. So the person who was so amenable and gave me a complete list of all reserves left the bookstore. And the next person who stepped in said, that's proprietary, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna give you any list. So that challenge though, my reserve person said, well, you can say that, but I'm going to get the list anyway. And he found a way to scrape the website and get most of the listings doing a systematic search. So we got that list together. I will say we're still going to work with the bookstore because they don't need to give us every piece of data that they have, but trying to get at least a minimal list. I mean, they get it from our professors, but they not be willing to give it to us. We're not going to sell it on the internet. You know, you're not going to make that much money. The other challenge that we had with this program was the comparison. So for those of you who do reserves programs, you know that the biggest problem is ISBNs. are very unique, often for course packs. So just running a set within Alma isn't your only solution. You also have to read the list. So in addition to just running the set and finding the books, one of the things that the reserves people did was just read the titles, do a title matching, trying to look for things that stuck out, particularly with some of the big courses, to make sure that the list was more thorough than just the matching, because there was a lot more in the collection than just that list. So now I'm going to tell you what I thought was a success about this. So what I think is one of the most powerful is discoverability. Because Leganto is connected with Alma in a way that the workflow is single, we were able, the discovery through the Primo interface, Course Reserve tab, which I fought for in our Primo edition, all reserves were discoverable, 100% through the course, through the Primo interface, which made service at the desk much more easy. Every student could see all the reserves. Leganto ensured that the discovery through the Blackboard classes was there. So I think that what I think about this project is I was able to maximize everything we had in the collection and make sure it was discoverable. Textbook use, I will give you some numbers just to see. Textbook use went up. We actually, one of the things we did with this list was also to get rid of the junk, the stuff that people have on reserves for years. We actually cut our reserve in half, took down shelves. We went from over 1,200 books to 600 in the first iteration. We're going back up because we're finding more uses. But usage went up at the same time we took down. Building relationships. So I want to share, I forget whether it's this slide or the next, but 2 great stories about the relationships that got improved through this program. So one of these, we found a textbook, we put it on reserves, we contact professor. Professor immediately writes back and says, oh, by the way, I'm going to show my personal DVD in class. I'd love to put that on reserve so the student can get it. My reserve person says, not a problem, but let me take a look. He says, by the way, we already own that DVD. I'd be happy to put that on physical reserves for you. And then my reserve person started thinking again, and we also offer streaming. So we have a couple of streaming services. We looked it up, that title was available. So we went back to the professor and said, instead of all this, I'm going to make this available through your course reading list, streaming for you 100%. And the professor was ecstatic. So now they could watch it in class through the streaming, as well as allowing the students to go back and watch it again. So that professor was super happy with this relationship building. Let's see. The other example, if I can put it down.
So I have to use someone else's computer.
So another example, I have to remember what it was. I actually have a few, but so we did this outreach to the liaison librarians. We talked about this program of putting these textbooks. So one of the other relationships that was built is we put one up for some of the medical classes, the nursing classes, and the nursing professor contacted the liaison and contacted us and said, by the way, I've taught a lot of classes here and I have a lot of copies of different textbooks. Would you like them? And we said, sure, let's take a look at what they are. So out of about 15 textbooks, about 8 of them, I think 8 or 9, were currently used by other classes that were not hers, but were actually being used. So we actually built reading lists. First of all, she gave us those textbooks, we built a relationship with her, and then we started relationships with 8 or 9 other faculty in nursing because we had their textbooks online. So I think the whole goal of this, a lot of work to just get the bookstore and find out what's in the collection, was about what happens at the end, building that relationship, and getting more textbooks available to students. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the results. So as you can see, in the first iteration of this project, we went up 70% in our circulation of course reading lists. At the same time, we reduced our books in half. I think, and then in the second iteration, which was spring, This spring, we actually went up another 8%. Now, I will say this textbook program is mixed with a lot of different outreach and program, but this was the main drive for these 2 semesters. So most of that increase was directly related to getting the textbooks online on Leganto and on Alma for that semester. So I thought that was a pretty good. Again, it's not just about use by the students, but it's also about building that relationship for faculty to get even more textbooks. So the things I think I learned out of this was stronger engagement with faculty. And I hate to call it this, but it's the back door. Because we continue to try our direct marketing for Leganto, offering videos. The new campus engagement package has really been great. But the back door seems to be more effective for my university because there's so many new products out there. There's so many new softwares being offered by the universities. Just saying we have this great new tool to help you build these powerful reading lists for your class isn't as effective as saying, I've already built you one list, you can start here. We've actually had several faculty just keep adding to the list. It's created more conversations with faculty. Most of the people we're engaging with under this project have not used reserves before. The bookstore list does produce a lot of interaction with professors who always put their textbook on reserve because we found their textbook, we put it on reserve. But it's finding a lot of faculty who have not used reserves, who do not understand it. This program was primarily on print, but the truth is it helps me build my electronic reserves as well, because we stress during our open relationship with people, this isn't just about textbooks, it's about any of your readings, which also helps keep us kind of thinking about copyright. And then more reading lists for students. We've got this program and a couple others that are really trying to make sure that we put the maximum amount of reading lists available to students. Because I talked about the student who came to visit us. Well, last year, a second student approached us, contacted the dean invited me to a meeting, and this was all about student government and how veterans were having trouble getting their textbooks because it was taking long to be funded through the Veterans Administration, and they weren't getting their textbooks. So it allowed me to make more conversations about where I can focus future efforts on the program and on finding textbooks for students. So I think the program was a great success for me. We're going to continue it. We're still going to fight with the bookstore and try and build that relationship with them. Leganto and working with Alma. One of the things we thought is, how about building some data on how students ask for a textbook that's not there? So we have found a couple of ways to track turnaways in order to build a list, because that might be one of the things he can look at is if a book was turned away for, we all know this one too, cell biology, he can look at it and then go back to the list from the bookstore, find out how many students are using it. One of the two things that are not on here that I'm going to do is I've got a connection with enrollment that they're going to give me a list of all the courses and how much the enrollment is, so that the bookstore's not giving me all the information, I can match it up. So tracking turnaways, if you look at the enrollment, the other part that just got approved is I got an extra $5,000 into a special fund, particularly for buying textbooks. And I'm going to track the usage of those textbooks to see the accessibility through Leganto. I gave you the numbers on the physical. I will tell you one of the features of Leganto that I'm really happy about is I have no history on electronic reserves. I have no data from the previous system. We disconnected it and it was all gone. But I do have complete analytics for the last 2 semesters in electronic reserves through Leganto. I think they're improving that area actually.
It goes like 8,000,000%.
Yeah. I think the key on this was communicating with professors and the opportunity I can build a relationship on reserves. it's often, the one thing that was said to me by one of my managers, he says, why don't we just go to the department and talk to them? And yes, that's often helpful. But what I think is more effective is when I've done something for them to help them in their class and to help their students without being asked. I think then the conversation when I walk into their department is a very different conversation. The other thing is that last student that spoke to me was with student government. So student government is engaged now with me, wanting to talk about how they can promote textbook affordability. We can't, I actually took the original bookstore number and I figured out, what if I buy one copy of every textbook? It was $112,000, and that was just the required readings. And I said, there's no way that that's useful. And in my previous experience, buying textbooks, just any textbook, isn't effective. Because I'll tell you right now, if you buy a textbook for English class, you're wasting your money, because the English students want their copy of the textbooks, because they love books. So I want to keep, in everything I do, I try and think about the possibilities of how to maximize. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover with this. I think we're going to do some demos, but if you have questions, I will say that the textbook accessibility program is actually very broad. We're doing several other, working directly with some of our Learning Commons partners. In addition to this textbook, this is just one small side of it. I think there's a lot of outreach. It's all about relationships. I've built this great relationship with the Writing Center, which I've never had anywhere I've worked before. The department had approved the reading list for over 60 classes, and we reached out to over 60 different English composition classes and put reading lists in their classes. And again, those professors contact us and say, this is great, can you add this? We've also used the uniqueness of Leganto. That reading list for composition not only includes connections to Purdue OWL to help with the writing list because it's an electronic, but we also put in actually a link directly to the Writing Center to write from their reading list. They can schedule an appointment to the Writing Center. So thank you for listening to me out. If you have any questions, we're going to talk later. Thank you.
See, aren't you glad we had a surprise guest? I realized as you were speaking, though, that I maybe need to do a little bit of translating for people. There's enough familiar faces in the room that I think a lot of you are probably already familiar with some of the Ex Libris products. So some of the things that I think we maybe should have started off with, is Alma. Alma is the Ex Libris library service platform. Alma is also the platform that Leganto is built on top of. So it uses the data that exists in the library already for things like your user information, who are your patrons, what is your collection, what e-resources do you subscribe to, all of that. So there's a really great integration between the two products there, and I'll show you that as I'm going through the demo. So those are the two products that you mentioned. Then Primo is the discovery layer that's used again with Alma for the patron-facing side. The other thing that I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about that Dennis mentioned is the campus engagement group. This is something that didn't exist when you were going through your implementation, but it's something that I think is really exciting that's happening at Ex Libris right now. As part of the Leganto implementation, the technical implementation of Leganto is really not that difficult. It's using a product that already exists within the library, the Alma product and the Primo product. So there's some new integrations that happen with the learning management system and loading courses in and things like that. But most of what implementation actually is for Leganto is working with the campus engagement team. And what they do is help libraries reach out to partners within the institution to help promote the product. Find ways for you to find new people that you maybe haven't worked with before, or identify people that you have worked with before that you think will be great partners through this project. They also have a great toolkit that includes things like sample emails that you can send out to faculty or other departments, demo scripts that you can use when you're showing the product to different groups of people. So there's really a great resource that exists for exactly the reason that you described it. Miami did this pilot program and really, got a lot of interest, but not actually a lot of engagement. And so we want to make sure that we're there to help libraries promote the product and that it is successful as you're implementing in the institution. So I think that's something that a lot of people are excited about. I'm also excited about it. It's a great team of people who are there to help you out. So what I'm going to do now is go through a little bit of a demo of Leganto so that you can see what this looks like. And I have done my best to create my own spin on what you described as your process. So this may not be exactly how you do it, but I'm going to show how what Dennis is doing is possible with the Leganto solution. So I'll walk through a similar workflow to what he described, and I'll show you what that looks like. Leganto is something that's used by instructors, students, and the library. There's other stakeholders as well if you think about things like Campus IT or the people who manage the LMS, but primarily speaking, those are your three stakeholders: students, instructors, and the library. So I'm going to show what this looks like from all three of those perspectives. I like to start from the student perspective because I think that if your reading list doesn't work for students, then there's really no point in having one. That's why you build a reading list, is so that students have it. So I like to show this first just to kind of give an idea of what it is that we're talking about here and what kind of the end goal of it is. I am using Canvas, as you can see, but it integrates with your learning management system. You're using Blackboard. There's a number of other ones as well. But as a student, I don't need to know about another place to go to look for information about my course. I just log into the learning management system, which is where I'm going already. So I'm going to click into my course. Our Canvas environment does not have very much data in it in our FIG courses, but I can go in here to this resource list tab. This is what we called it, but you can call it whatever you want it to be called. And this actually will open up the Leganto reading list or resource list. I say both of those phrases kind of interchangeably, depending on who you're talking to. Sometimes people have course readings, and sometimes they also have things like websites and tutorials and videos and audio files and things like that. So it's not necessarily just readings. This can be all different types of materials that are included in here. But this is what a Leganto list looks like embedded here within the learning management system. So I know that this is very small for you. You don't have to be able to read this. I'll just kind of point out some of the highlights as we go through this. I can see, if you scroll down, you can see that there's a number of different resources that are part of this list. There's room in here for annotations from the instructors. We know from working with faculty that this is something that's really important to them. They want to make sure that the students understand why they're being asked to read something and what they should be getting out of that reading. And so we have this first one as an example. Again, I'm a student looking at this. I can see the link to this. This is something that's available through my library, through the electronic holdings of the library. This is an article, so you can see the link from for the article there. But also I have information coming from my instructor. They've set a due date on this. They've given me some additional details about it in the public note session. I also, as a student, have this private note section, so I can say, I was confused about this section, or I should go back to these pages when it comes time to write the paper, or whatever I want to keep track of about this particular reading, I can do that right from here. I also have a discussion panel over on the side so that I, as a student, can engage with instructors or with my classmates about this particular reading. Let them know if there's anything, let the instructor know if there's anything that doesn't make sense, or let them know that I am actually doing the readings and I have good thoughts about these readings and really stand out in what may be a large class here. But it doesn't have to just be library materials. I think I come from the library background. This, to me, is the obvious benefit, is that you're highlighting the library collection. But if instructors are using other types of things in their reading lists, we can manage that as part of a single list. So the second one on this one is a TED Talk. There's a direct link out to this TED Talk. If we go down below, this fourth one is What is Human Services? This is a website, so you can just pull in URLs from websites. All different types of resources can be added to a reading list here. You also can include information about the library's physical materials, as you mentioned that you're doing for reserves at the University of Miami. So here's an example of something where the library has physical copies of this, and we can see the current to the day, to the minute, to the second details about the availability of those physical items. what kinds of options are available to me maybe as an undergraduate student for this particular resource. This is pulling the data that would display in Primo. So again, presenting this information in a way that will be familiar to students as they get used to using the library collection. We're pulling the same linking information and the same physical availability that they'll see in other places. Generally speaking, students, let's say early freshman students, aren't all that familiar with searching a large academic library's collection and finding what they're looking for. This is one of the challenges with the way that Course Reserves works today, generally speaking, is the students may get a list of what they need to read, but then they're responsible for going out on their own and finding those things. And maybe they buy them from the bookstore, maybe they look online and see that they can buy it online for $40. They may not find it in the library collection, they may not know to look in the library collection. And so we're able to put all of this in the same place for students. So that's just kind of a quick flyby of the student view. I want to focus a little bit more on the workflows now for how the library can work with instructors for the course lists. I'm going to log out here and I'm going to log back into Canvas now as somebody who's set up as an instructor instead. So the list will look very similar from the instructor perspective. I have things that I can edit, I can put in notes and due dates and things like that. So this here is the exact same list, but now we'll look at it from the perspective of the instructor for this course. So you can see the same list that we saw from the student perspective. Instructors have this list advisor over here. What this is doing is recommending things that instructors can do to make the list more user-friendly. It's things like add due dates to things, fill in a description of your section, I keep saying session, sorry, of your section so that students will understand what you're supposed to get out of this. There was a study actually, this happened later, but there was a study that was done in the UK about where they surveyed students and asked them what makes you do the readings on your reading list. And they said things like it should be annotated, it should have a mix of material types, it should have no more than 30 items on it, it should have due dates, it should have tags. It was exactly the things that we were doing with Leganto, and so we were really excited to hear that that is something that students are looking for as well. So that's what the list advisor is over here. Sorry, I got myself distracted because I just heard this story like 2 days ago and I was really excited about it. So anyway, that's the list advisor. We also over here have the same citations that we saw before. Instructors can see the kind of at a glance usage information here. So I can see as an instructor the comments, the number of discussion comments that are on this particular citation, the number of students who marked that they liked it. This is tracking unique users here. And I can also see the number of view its as well. So the number of students who are actually even opening this up and taking a look at it. But I also, as an instructor, have much more advanced analytics as well. There's a report section over here that shows usage of my courses specifically. And it allows instructors to track, this will be very, very small. Let me zoom this in a little bit. Track kind of overall usage information, number of likes, number of comments for the list that they teach. But then there's a tab here, this usage tab lets them drill down into more details to look at things like usage by week, usage by citation, total number of the activity score, which is pulling together like the percentage of students in the course who are actually doing the readings, and breaks it down by how many readings there actually are. So there's a pretty complex math calculation kind of running underneath this to give the instructors a very quick, wow, this first course that I teach has absolutely nobody using it. That might be a good thing to know. It's hard to get like fake usage information from your fake students, so ours looks a little bit silly. But in real life, you would hopefully have a little bit more than zero usage. But if you do have zero usage, that's a good thing for an instructor to know while the course is going on. Hopefully it's not the whole list. If there is, maybe there's some sort of technical issue, which would also be good for them to know. But they can drill down here. I'm also able to look at this at the citation level, same information. So as an instructor, I can track the unique users engaging with this reading and clicking through it. If there's something that is really important to the course and nobody is reading that, that would be good for me to know as the course is still going on so that I can maybe adjust what it is that I'm doing. So those are some of the extra tools that are available to instructors. I'll show you a little bit more with this, but I did want to kind of walk through some of the workflows that Dennis was mentioning that they do at the University of Miami. So first of all, I want to show you that I, as an instructor, teach this Sherlock Holmes course as well. Let's pretend that this course hasn't started. Maybe I've never taught it before. Maybe I didn't even know that my school had Levanto. And if we click into resource list here, there isn't already a resource list for this particular course. So this is something instructors can do. They can build their own reading list or resource list for new courses. This will actually walk me through a little wizard in order to create this list from scratch. What I want to do instead is show the way that the library can work with the instructors in order to build the list together. So now, for a change of pace, we're going to log into Alma instead. Make this bigger. So I'm logging in as somebody who does everything that there is to do at my library. So if my Alma looks a little bit different from your Alma, it's because I have all the power at my library. I have all the roles, I have all of the responsibilities. I have a lot of work to do here. So we know already that, that there is this new course that's being taught, and also that it doesn't have a list associated with it. So what I'm going to do here in my Alma environment is go into the courses section of Alma. You can load all of your course information in from the course management system. You can do that as part of a bulk load. There's also a really nice rollover process as well. So as the courses are repeating themselves every year, sometimes with very minimal changes, you never need to reinvent these reading lists, recreate the wheel with these things. They'll be rolled over as part of this course loader tool. But what I'm going to do is take a look for that Sherlock Holmes course that my instructor is teaching. And we can go in here and see, go to the reading list. Actually, I think for this one I'll be creating a reading list because there isn't one already. So I'm going to say add a reading list, and it is for our good. It is filling this in for me because I did this already. So here I'm just creating the basic structure for this reading list. And then as library staff, I can work on this reading list here in Alma, but I also can work on it in Levanto. So that's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to go into View in Levanto, and I'll show you some of the tools that are available for while you're building the list together. So I have here new sections. I didn't point this out when we looked at the student view, but it's broken down into week 1, week 2, week 3, things like that. So those are the sections. I could put in a section description here. I may not know what the instructor wants to do with this section, so we'll leave that for them to do. And then let's do a required reading section too. We could continue to do this, but you get the idea, I think. If instructors are building their own list from scratch, it actually walks them through this in a little bit more intuitive way because it is more of a wizard. So it says things like, which course is this for? We already know because we were in the learning management system. So it can just auto-populate that information. You can also, as an instructor, choose to use a template in order to build this list together. So you can set up templates for week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, optional reading, required reading, and so on and so on. But this is, from the library perspective, I'm filling that information in here. So now I have 2 sections in my course, and I want to add some things to my list. And let me zoom this in a little bit here. Over here on the side, this lets me search directly against the library holdings. So I have a couple of options. I have an option to search directly against Alma because I'm a staff user. This isn't something that instructors would be able to see, but you as library staff would be able to search directly against the Alma holdings. And then all of these other options are what we have set up as our search scopes on our demo Primo site. So if you have things like a local collection, articles and more collection, course reserves, whatever your Primo site is set up with is what we'll display here. So let's say that we have a list of books that we know we want to bring in. Maybe you have the ISBNs from the bookstore. Maybe you don't want to type ISBNs in front of an audience. So I'm just saying I'm looking for all of my Sherlock Holmes books that I want to add. So what has happened here, I'm going to zoom this out a little bit, just so it's a little easier to kind of work with, is it's searching directly against my library collection in Alma, and I can see electronic inventory, the things where I have physical inventory as well, and those are all just listed right here. In order to add these to my list, I just drag and drop them over. So we'll put a couple of things on the reading list for this. So if you know what the instructors are doing, or they've dropped a list off at your desk, or you got it by scraping the website, however you maybe know that these exist, it's very easy to get them into the reading list here. I'm just grabbing some so we have some nice things to work with later. And then of course we can also do this with article or chapter level results coming from the discovery layer. And so I will search some of these as well. And with this, you have the option if you want. There's a checkbox here for include records without full text access. If you do want to make it easier for instructors or staff to just get the citation metadata for these resources, you'll track the actual articles down yourselves. Some other way you can do that. I'm going to say that I want just the things that we do have access to, and Sherlock Holmes television is what I'm looking for this course. So again, it's pulling a search. I have a couple of filters here to narrow down the type of resource that we found, and I can see the full text available here. And this is all of the things that my library subscribes to. So again, I'm just going to drop some of these in. You can also remove things as well. So I can take this out, and then just build the list together in this way. There are many other ways that you can add things to a list. I have a create option here. This lets you just put in the metadata for something. You can put in books that you don't have. Maybe the instructor has a copy that they're going to drop off. You can put in the information about that. Maybe they want to upload a particular writing assignment. You can upload files into here as well. It really is for whatever types of resources you want to add. Another way that I like to show adding things to the reading list, actually I'm going to show that from the instructor side. So hold on to that thought. There's another very cool way, but you have to wait for it. So let's go and take a look now. I've built a list. I didn't fill in any information. The instructor can set their own due dates. All I did was add in those citations. And now if we switch back over to Alma and I can work on this, it's created this reading list here in my Alma environment. There's no need to sync data back and forth between the two. Anything that happens in one system immediately is reflected in the other system. So you can always see exactly what's being used in a course. In this case now I have, some of these are library materials. Let's say this physical book here. I will then be able to bring this item into the course reserve stacks. I have this now as a way to integrate with the workflows that we're doing in the library to manage the course materials. So things like bringing them in from the stacks, ordering more copies of something. You can see here also there's a flag that this has demand in other reading lists. I can click into this and see that this particular book is on 3 different courses with 65 participants overall. So I can see, maybe this is something that we want to order another copy of, or maybe not, depending on what it is and what your policies are for that. A lot of what you do at the library level, once the list exists, really depends on what you want to do. You don't have to purchase all of the things that are on the list. You don't have to even bring them in. The point is that you know what they are. You know that the library materials are being used for the courses where it makes sense. And also, of course, we're able to track the usage of those materials as well. Everything that gets used for a course goes through the link resolver. Even if it's something like on a TED Talk, they're still clicking through to it from the Legato interface. So we're able to track the usage of both library resources as well as non-library resources. If there's an article that maybe you're using under fair use from a journal, but it gets a lot of usage, you can use that for collection development purposes and say, these are some journal titles that we should probably purchase because they're getting heavy usage in our courses. So let's say we've built this list, perfect, it didn't take very long. And now we've told the instructor that their list is ready. So I can go and back and be my instructor again, and I'm just going to give it a little refresh here. So I'm going back to my Sherlock Holmes course. And click into the resource list again. And now, instead of that wizard, we have the list that's been created by the library. So I can see all of the things that I had said I wanted to use for this course. I can go in as an instructor and annotate these, remove things, delete things. It's really up to me what I want to do with this. I can also, and this sounds to me like what you have described, I can say, these are the things I told the library about, but I have some other things that I want to use for this course as well. So I have the same edit options that we saw and zoomed in more now here. You have to just sacrifice being able to read these words. You get the idea. So I have the same options that we saw from the library perspective. I am now an instructor, so I don't see the ALMA scope here, but otherwise I have all of the same options to search the library inventory and add things, create my own resources as well. But another thing that I really like from the perspective of the instructor is the ability to add things from other sources. We like to believe that maybe we would only use the library collection as they're thinking about things for their course, but I think we also all know that that's probably not how this works. So we can say, as an instructor, I'm just kind of browsing around and living my life, and I stumble upon some things that I know will be great for my course. So I can use this Cited tool here in order to pull resources in. This is one that I actually found from Google Scholar. I just did search for Sherlock Holmes, I think. So I found this through Google Scholar, but the Cited tool here will pull in the information about this particular citation, but also check the library collection. So immediately I can see that this is something that's already covered by the library. It will be free to my students and don't have to worry about that. And I can add it into my reading list from here. You can also add things into a collection. This is just a place for instructors to gather resources together. You can also, of course, use the Cited tool to add things. You get to watch this ad here. To add things that aren't part of the library collection and maybe never will be part of the library collection. So I can pull this video in as well. It's creating some basic metadata about this, but this is just a form that I can adjust here or change later. So as an instructor, I have all of the same tools and abilities to add things to my list. If we take a look at this, this is the one that I added from, is this Wiley? The one that I added from Wiley here. Immediately, it has brought in the library inventory for this one, so I have this link available. Instructors never need to know how to create links and fill in the proxy information and make sure that they're doing all of that correctly. That just happens automatically here. I can also go in and very easily put in a due date for this, fill in my public note, so that the students know what to do with this and share it. There's an option here, as this list is being built, let me flip back over quickly here. The status of the reading list on the ALMA side is being prepared. There's a step here where the instructor can push the list to the library. This says send list. This will actually change the status of that reading list. So if you have instructors who are just sort of playing around and building some lists and maybe testing some new things, you don't need to worry about that. You can see that this is something that's not quite ready for you yet. When they hit the send list button, that will immediately flag this for you as something to take a look at. You also have a lot of options for configuring the system to take care of workflows for you or start to take care of workflows for you. So some of these citations that I added, some say complete and some say being prepared. This is based on rules that we set up in the library environment to say things like, if it's something that's added from Primo and we have inventory for it, we have access to it, we don't need to look at it, just mark it as complete. You can say if it comes from YouTube, we do want to look at that because we want to make sure that it looks like something that was loaded fairly. So you have, those are just examples, but you can set up those kinds of rules, and that's what we're seeing here. And then on the ALMA side, let me just refresh this since we loaded some new citations into this. On the ALMA side, I have these different facets that are available to me in order to scope down the list. So I could take a look at this and say, I can see that this list is ready for me to work on. I want to filter it down only to the ones that are not complete. And now I have, again, the ability to see all of the things that the instructors included, but there's only 2 things on this list that I actually might need to do something with based on the rules that we've set in our library. So that is a fairly quick demo, walking through what I think might be similar to the workflow that you guys are doing. I want to make sure that we save a lot of time for questions though. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap us up. Does anybody have any questions?
So this recording is available?
Say that again.
Recording?
The recording. Ben is in charge of the
The recording will
recording.
be available, yes. We will be posting it up on YouTube, so I'll find a way to disseminate that.
Yes.
Hi, Amy Slater Brandes. I actually have a question for Dennis. Since you piloted this among your faculty, I was kind of wondering what some of the methods you use to identify the faculty who use this. And like, did you do a workshop or a training to kind of help them ease their way through it? I just know my faculty don't like to do anything, so I was kind of wondering what best practices you might have to suggest.
Well, the best practice we've used initially are now different, and I'll tell you why. So like she said, the campus engagement toolkit is really pretty good, but don't tell us what you're saying. Because when we started the pilot, we literally created our PDFs to tell people how to get started. We literally started doing videos to tell people how to engage. And we looked at everyone that was using our previous system and started talking to them. So that's how we started. And we got a lot of interest. I mean, it was just, it's a new system. They didn't want to start it. They didn't want to use it. Now what we've done is we've created both websites and resources based off of the toolkit. So we didn't have to do as much work to get started. And what we do is if someone says something at the desk, in everything we do a campus email every semester telling people, oh, don't forget about reserves. We keep modifying that message to say, here's a link, here's the website to get you started, here's a video to get you started. So the engagement just so that we don't have to do all the work to start the engagement.
Great.
Does that answer you?
It does, thank you.
This is something that's available if you're interested. It's on the Knowledge Center, so knowledge.exlibrisgroup.com. And if you go into the Leganto section, in the product materials section, this is where the campus engagement tools are there.
Thank you.
Can you speak to some of the accessibility testing you've done, since this seems to open up within the course management system? Does it read with screen readers well?
We are actually in the process right now. We expect to have a new VTAT out, I believe it's August. So we have gotten the results back we use an independent company, a separate company, in order to analyze the product. We've gotten results back and we are making some changes based on that, but we expect to have the updated VTAT released. I think it's late summer. I want to say August, but I'm not positive.
I will also say that's an option. You can have it open in the course management system or open in its own browser. It's a feature you pick out when you set up Leganto.
Do you have an estimate of how many colleges and universities are using Leganto? And if so, have they given you feedback on just the interface and just their feedback overall?
Yes. We have 94 who have signed for Leganto. Somewhere above 55 of them are live. We are getting a lot of feedback from our user group all the time. This is really how Ex Libris works. We listen a lot to people telling us things. Leganto is also part of the Ideas Exchange. So this is ideas.exlibrisgroup.com. This is a place for anybody, even if you don't have our products, to submit ideas for things for the products. And so we use this all the time to get just feedback from the community. We also, so you can see here some of the statuses. There's 12 ideas that are planned, 14 that have been completed here. So that's certainly a place for people to give feedback. The product manager for Leganto also works very closely with the customer community to hear these kinds of stories. If you have things like, oh, this doesn't work the way it should, there have actually been some pretty significant improvements to the the interface itself over the last couple months. A couple things, this little plus sign here now opens up the option to add from all different types of resources. You used to have to do this kind of at the section level, and then it was different if you were loading from Primo versus loading from another place. So we've been making some, just improvements to the interface itself, and always will, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And I realize we're supposed to be repeating the questions, but we're not. Hopefully we're answering the questions in a way that the people listening to the recording will understand what they were. You have a question?
The cited add-on, is that also an Ex Libris product?
This is something, the question was about the cited add-on. This is actually something that's just included with Leganto. I will delete it so that you can see how it works. The way that you add this is, the projector does strange things. So here I can see the cited. There's a pretty long list of places where this has been tested and verified. It includes a lot of publisher platforms, things like Amazon, YouTube, Barnes & Noble, Canopy, NASA. But it works on other sites as well. I've pulled things from like random blog posts and had success with that. But all that you have to do to install this is just drag and drop it up onto the toolbar, and now it will work for me to pull these things in. The first time that an instructor logs into Leganto, they get a little message kind of letting them know some basic things about the product, and that's one of the things that's included is how to install the Cited tool. Cited tool is probably my favorite because it really is just so flexible. You can add things from anywhere. But
Things that Leganto can let students, instructors, and libraries have to do. But what I don't have is a sense of what it's like, or if this is even a scenario where you have a person or people managing all the work that goes into creating reading lists that encompass everything. And I'm sorry I missed the initial talk, but if you have a situation where instructors can do it all themselves, some instructors want to do some kind of things themselves, not others. Some instructors want the library to do it all. How does that overall process get managed?
It's managed by the person in charge of your reserves, and I'll say from UN. So the nice thing about this product is really why I really wanted to go to it, is Alma helps you manage it. So if an instructor starts a list but doesn't finish it, the person who manages it from Alma side can see that. And if they complete a list and they send to the library, it tells them in their action page, you've got a reading list to work on. And then if an instructor walks up to the desk and hands me a form, then that person takes that form, goes right into Alma, starts the reading list, or can go into Leganto, depending, I think there's some parts of Leganto. So it's all managed from Alma, the Alma workflows, is I think the answer to your question. So the person every day walks in, signs into Alma, and they can see how many instructors have submitted reading lists, how many instructors are working on reading lists. Maybe you want to reach out to them and say, hey, I know you started this reading list, but you didn't finish it. Can we help you with that? And it's all managed through Alma from at UM. So my person is always, first thing walks into Alma and see what's going on with the system. Does that kind of answer your question?
Kind of.
So in the wild,
So is it like, but are you working on things as reading lists, or are you looking at instructors from across the board have put things on their reading list that are now I need to go pull, or somebody that works with me needs to go pull?
The reading list does tell you. So if they put a book on a reading list, if they haven't sent it to the library, you can see that it's there. So you might contact the professor and say, do you want us to get this in action? Do you want it to go? But most of the time, the professor will put it on the reading list and submit it to the library, which then that reading list comes up for action. The person looks at it and goes, oh, and she didn't show it because there's a lot to show, but you go, actually, it says, be prepared. This is a book in the collection. The person goes in and says, pull it, move it to the reserve collection. It goes to the paging list. We go pull it, we check it in, bam, it's ready to go on reserves. We do stickers, so we put the stickers on. So the reading list is the driving force to tell my person what to do next. If it's an article that's already available full text, there's nothing to do. You can just mark it as complete, mark the reading list as complete, and you're ready to go. If it's a book to be pulled, the person actually goes in, says, move it to reserve, it's going to be on 3-hour reserve. It prints a pull list, you go get the book, you check it in, it goes on reserve. So the reading list is the driving workflow, I think, is the answer to your question.
Of how universities use Legato in general. You know, do you want to create the reading lists for instructors? Do you want to push them to create their own reading lists? Do you want to have a mix? I think we all know that there will always be some instructors who just won't use a new system. You can probably think of who they are. But there will also be people who are really excited about this. So you can certainly have the kind of implementation be a mix of these things. What we see a lot of is initially the library does what you're doing and building the list, but then as instructors start using it, they realize that it's not hard to use, and so then they get more excited about using it on their own. And then from the perspective of what the library does to support course reserves or course readings, course materials, that's really up to you. There's nothing that's set. You don't have to now purchase a copy of everything just because the instructor added it on the reading list. You have the option to do that because you have the information that you wouldn't have had access to otherwise about what instructors are using. But you can set and define your own boundaries around how the library is then going to support course reserves. What we found is that having a tool like this, and I think you were just telling me this story as well, having a tool like this makes for some significant efficiencies in terms of the library workflows, to the point where then you can scale up the services that you provide because you have more time, because you're not going in and manually adding all of these resources to a list and trying to track down the instructors and so on. So when you have the tool that enables this kind of natural communication between the two groups, then you can expand what you may be offering today.
One other quick question, and I don't know whether the answer is correct or not. What for things that do need to be scanned and posted as PDFs, there's copyright concern. What does Legato or something in the system do to manage?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple options for this. Let me show you one thing first. From the instructor perspective, you can again set up rules around how these things will happen. So this one here is a physical book that I've put on reserve. If I only need one chapter of this book, I can put in my digitization request in here, and I can say that I need chapter 6 of this, and I can submit my digitization request. We've set up rules in the Alma environment that do things like check to see if this has ever been digitized for a course before, and I can say, no, it hasn't, therefore it's been automatically approved. That auto approval and why that auto approval happened is tracked in the system. If another course or maybe next semester we get a request to digitize from the same book again, that auto approval process won't happen because we've already digitized a copy for a course or a chapter from this book for a course. And so then I can go in and take a manual look at it instead. There's tools on Alma side as well on each individual citation to track copyright decisions that have been made. So if you decide that something falls within fair use guidelines and you want to fill that information in so that you have the data later, you can do that and it's stored indefinitely within the system about that particular citation. We also do have an integration with the CCC. If you have a situation where you need to purchase a license for something for course materials, you can do that right within the Alma interface in order to make that available for students. And then the last thing that I think is relevant here might have just fallen out of my mind. All of this is stored within the system. The other thing, we're adding something, I believe it's in the July release, that when an instructor loads a PDF into the system, there's a little checkbox that they can check that says, there's one right now already that says something like, this was authored by me and doesn't require copyright clearance, but there's another one coming that says, I have evaluated that this is in the public domain or is open access. So there's also a room for instructors to kind of make that decision for themselves, whether this is something that you want or not. It's up to how your library handles copyright. But there are tools that allow you to streamline some of the decision making for this. If fair use is a sticky situation, but some of this you can set up the rules for things like auto approval, but I think more importantly track what decisions were made and why they were made, so that when they come up again the next time around, you have that history. With that, we are over time. So thank you so much to all of you, and thank you for all of your questions. I can hang out. I don't know if you can as well. I'm happy to take more questions up here, but thank you to all of you for coming.
Absolutely.